Have you ever watched a man dig his own grave with a smile on his face? There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a room when a husband walks into his 10th wedding anniversary party, with his arm around a woman who isn't his wife. Julian Thorne thought he was the smartest man in New York City. He thought his wife, Lakota, was just a trophy, a quiet, naive woman who stayed at home while he built his empire. But Julian made one fatal calculation error that night. He didn't know that the luxury hotel he was standing in, the staff serving his champagne, and the security guards watching his every move, all belonged to her. This is the story of how Lakota Thorne turned an anniversary dinner into a public execution. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Stratford Regency smelled of white lilies and impending ruin. Lakota Thorne stood in the center of the room, her silhouette framed by the towering floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the rainy expanse of Manhattan. At 34, Lakota possessed a beauty that was often described as statuesque, cold, immovable, and undeniably expensive. She wore a gown of emerald silk that draped over her frame like liquid armor, the back plunging low to reveal a spine that had never bent for anyone, though her husband, Julian, liked to believe otherwise. She adjusted a single crystal flute on the head table, rotating it 2 degrees to the right. Perfect. Mrs. Thorne? The voice echoed in the cavernous, empty hall. Lakota didn't flinch. She turned slowly to see Marcus Sterling, the general manager of the hotel, walking toward her. Marcus was a man of 50, with silver fox hair and a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was also the only person in the world who knew the truth about today. "Is everything in place, Marcus?" Lakota asked, her voice smooth, betraying not a tremor of the anxiety that should have been consuming a woman about to blow up her life. "The security team has been briefed," Marcus said, stopping a respectful distance away. He held a tablet against his chest. "The new deed transfer was finalized at 4:00 p.m. today. The legal team at Halloway and Finch confirmed it. You are officially the sole proprietor of the Stratford Regency and its 3 sister locations in London, Paris, and Tokyo." Lakota allowed a ghost of a smile to touch her lips. "And Julian? Does he have any idea?" "None," Marcus replied, his tone clipped. "Mr. Thorne still believes he secured the ballroom tonight through a friend of a friend discount. He believes the owner is still the chaotic conglomerate Vanguard Holdings. He has no idea the acquisition took place." "Good." Lakota walked over to the window, looking down at the street where limousines were beginning to circle like sharks. Julian Thorne, her husband of 10 years, the charismatic architect who had charmed the pants off New York's elite, and more recently, the pants off a 23-year-old interior design intern named Bella Sinclair. For the last 6 months, Lakota had played the part of the oblivious wife perfectly. She had smiled when he came home, late smelling of Chanel Chance, a perfume she never wore. She had nodded sympathetically when he claimed site inspections kept him out until 3 a.m. on Tuesdays. She had even signed the papers he slid across the breakfast table, documents he claimed were for tax purposes, but were actually attempts to move her inheritance into joint accounts. He thought she was stupid. He thought she was just the daughter of old money who didn't understand the complexities of finance. He didn't know that Lakota had hired a private investigator, Tobias Reed, 4 months ago. He didn't know that Tobias had provided 4K video footage of Julian and Bella at a resort in the Hamptons, and he certainly didn't know that Lakota had used her own inheritance, money Julian was desperate to get his hands on, to buy the very ground he was about to stand on. He requested a specific seating arrangement, Marcus noted, glancing at his tablet. He wants the intern, Miss Sinclair, seated at the main table. He listed her as executive assistant to the honoree. Lakota laughed, a dry, brittle sound. The audacity is almost impressive, isn't it? He's bringing his mistress to his own anniversary party and sitting her next to his wife. He wants to flaunt her in my face while I smile and cut the cake. He believes you are too polite to make a scene, Marcus said. He relies on your dignity, Lakota. He's right. I won't make a scene, Lakota said, turning back to the empty ballroom. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. I'm going to make an example. She ran a hand over the velvet tablecloth. Marcus, ensure the staff knows the protocol. When Julian orders the vintage Dom Perignon, I want the 1996 bottles brought out, the ones that cost $12,000 a pop. He won't want to pay for those, Marcus warned. He specifically asked for the house sparkling wine to be poured into premium bottles to save money. I know, Lakota said softly, but the owner of the hotel insists on the best for her guests, and since the bill will be presented to him publicly at the end of the night, let's make it a bill worth remembering. The doors at the far end of the hall opened. The first guests were arriving. Lakota took a deep breath, pulling the mask of the dutiful wife back over her face. The stage was set, the trap was baited, and the rat was walking right in. The lobby of the Stratford Regency was a masterpiece of Art Deco design. Gold leaf ceilings, black marble floors, and a chandelier that looked like a weeping willow made of diamonds. It was the kind of place that made you whisper. But Julian Thorne didn't whisper. He broadcasted. He swept through the revolving doors with the energy of a man who believed the world was a movie directed by him. He was handsome, objectively so, tall, with a jawline that could cut glass and hair that was perfectly coiffed. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, a midnight blue that distinguished him from the sea of black-clad waiters. On his arm was not his wife. It was Bella Sinclair. She was stunning, in a way that was meant to be noticed. She wore a dress of crimson red, a deliberate, aggressive clash against the elegant, muted tones of the hotel. It was tight, revealing, and screamed for attention. She clung to Julian's bicep, her eyes darting around the lobby with a mixture of awe and entitlement. "Julian, this place is insane," Bella giggled, her voice carrying over the soft jazz playing in the background. "You really rented the whole ballroom? For us?" "Of course," Julian said, patting her hand. He didn't say for my anniversary. He just said, "For us." "I know people, babe. The owner owes me a favor. We practically got this place for free." He checked his reflection in a brass pillar, adjusting his bow tie. He looked at himself with genuine affection. He was the picture of success. His architectural firm was struggling, his debts were mounting, and he was leveraging assets he didn't technically own. But nobody here knew that. Tonight was about cementing his image. "Now, remember," Julian whispered, leaning close to Bella's ear. "When we go up there, we have to be professional. You're my executive assistant. Lakota is... well, she's fragile. We don't want to upset her." Bella rolled her eyes playfully. "I know the drill, Julian. The boring wife gets the title, I get the fun. But..." She traced a finger down his lapel. "When do you tell her?" "You promised. After the anniversary, you ask for the divorce." "Tonight?" Julian lied smoothly. "I'm going to lay the groundwork tonight. Once I secure the investors at this party, I'll have the capital to buy her out. Then, it's just you and me." He believed it as he said it. That was Julian's superpower. He believed his own lies. They approached the grand staircase leading to the ballroom. At the top of the stairs, standing like a sentinel, was Marcus. Julian flashed his brightest, most winning smile. "Marcus, good to see you, old man. Everything ready?" Marcus looked down at Julian. His face was a mask of professional indifference, but his eyes were cold. "Mr. Thorne, your guests are already being seated. Mrs. Thorne is waiting for you at the head table." Marcus's gaze slid to Bella. He didn't blink. "And I see you've brought additional staff." Julian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Ah, yes. This is Miss Sinclair, my top assistant, essential for networking tonight. Put her next to me." "As you wish," Marcus said. "Although, I must inform you, there has been a slight change in the hotel's management policy regarding billing. All incidentals must be settled upon conclusion of the event." "Fine, fine," Julian waved him off, annoyed by the mundane details. "Just put it on the corporate tab. Let's go, Bella." Julian led Bella up the stairs, feeling the rush of adrenaline. He loved the danger. He loved the thrill of walking his mistress right past the hotel staff, right toward his wife. It made him feel powerful. It made him feel like a king. They entered the ballroom. The room fell silent for a heartbeat. 200 of New York's social elite turned to look. They saw Julian, the golden boy, and they saw the woman in the red dress clinging to him. Whispers started instantly. It sounded like the buzzing of 1,000 angry bees. "Who is that? That's not Lakota. Is that the intern at his anniversary?" Julian ignored them. He spotted Lakota at the head table. She was standing with her back to the window, the city lights creating a halo around her. She looked regal, distant. He walked up to her, decoupling his arm from Bella's just before he reached the table. "Lakota, darling," Julian said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. He smelled of scotch and audacity. "You look appropriate." Lakota didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in. She let his lips graze her cheek, her skin cool to the touch. She looked at him. Then her eyes shifted slowly to Bella, who was standing awkwardly a few feet away. "Julian," Lakota said. Her voice was low, audible only to him and Bella. "I see you brought work home with you." "Emergency briefing," Julian said quickly, flashing a grin that usually worked on everyone. "Bella has the files for the monolithic project. I figured she could grab a plate while we discuss the renderings with the investors." Bella stepped forward, extending a hand. Her nails were painted the exact same shade of red as her dress. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Thorne. Julian talks about you, occasionally." It was a dig, a sharp, petty little knife twist. Lakota looked at the extended hand. She didn't take it. Instead, she picked up her glass of water, took a sip, and set it down. "Miss Sinclair," Lakota said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You're wearing red. How brave. I usually reserve that color for the staff uniforms during the holidays." Bella's face flushed pink. Julian stiffened. "Lakota?" "Be nice," Julian hissed under his breath. "She's here to help me secure our future." "Of course," Lakota said, finally smiling. It was a terrifying smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "Please, sit down. I wouldn't want you to miss the show. I have a feeling tonight is going to be very educational for everyone involved." She gestured to the seats. Julian sat at the head of the table, placing Bella to his right. Lakota sat to his left. The dynamic was set. The husband, the wife, and the mistress breaking bread together in front of 200 witnesses. A waiter approached. A young man named Tobias, the very private investigator Lakota had hired months ago, now undercover in a waiter's uniform to gather final audio evidence. "Champagne, sir?" Tobias asked, holding a bottle of the 1996 Dom Perignon. "Yes, pour it," Julian said, not looking at the label. "And keep it coming. We have a lot to celebrate." "We certainly do," Lakota murmured. Watching the golden liquid fill her glass, she raised it slightly, catching Marcus's eye across the room. Marcus gave a barely perceptible nod. He tapped his earpiece. The doors to the ballroom were closed and locked. The trap was sealed. The first course was a lobster bisque with a cognac reduction, served in porcelain bowls that cost more than Bella Sinclair's monthly rent. The ballroom was alive with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, and the performative laughter of the wealthy. At the head table, however, the air was thick enough to choke on. Julian Thorne was in his element, or at least he thought he was. He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped over the back of Bella's seat, a gesture so casual yet possessive that it made the wife of Senator Harrison, seated across from them, raise a perfectly manicured eyebrow. "You see, Senator," Julian said, gesturing broadly with a breadstick, "architecture isn't just about buildings, it's about legacy. It's about leaving a mark on the skyline that says, 'I was here.' That's what I'm doing with the Skyline project. We break ground next month." "Is that so?" Senator Harrison asked, his tone dry. He glanced at Lakota. "I was under the impression that financing was still pending." "Mere formalities," Julian waved a hand dismissively. "The banks are lining up. Actually, Bella here has been instrumental in organizing the pitch decks. She's got a real eye for aesthetics." Bella beamed, interpreting this as her cue to speak. She had already finished 2 glasses of the Dom Perignon and was feeling loose. "Oh, absolutely. Julian is a genius. I just help him unlock his potential. You know, sometimes men just need a muse to really get the creative juices flowing." She placed a hand on Julian's thigh under the table. She thought she was being subtle. She wasn't. Lakota saw it. The senator saw it. The waiters saw it. Lakota sliced her bread with surgical precision. "A muse," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Interesting choice of words, Miss Sinclair. In Greek mythology, the muses were often tragic figures. They inspired great works, usually before being discarded when the artist moved on to the next shiny thing." Bella's smile faltered. "I think you're confusing them with someone else. I'm more of a partner." "A partner," Lakota mused, looking directly at Julian. "Julian, are we taking on new partners? I thought the firm was a sole proprietorship." Julian stiffened. He hated when Lakota talked business. He preferred her silent and decorative. "It's a figure of speech, Lakota. Don't be pedantic. You're boring the senator." "On the contrary," Senator Harrison said, looking at Lakota with newfound interest. "Mrs. Thorne seems to have a very sharp grasp of the situation." At that moment, the sommelier arrived. He was a tall, severe Frenchman named Jean-Luc, who had worked at the Stratford Regency for 20 years. He held a bottle of red wine, a 1982 Chateau Margaux, cradled like a newborn baby. Julian's eyes lit up. "Ah, the red. Finally. Pour it here, my good man." He tapped his glass impatiently. Jean-Luc didn't move. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed somewhere above Julian's hairline. "Monsieur," Jean-Luc said, his accent thick and unyielding. "I'm afraid there is a misunderstanding. This bottle is not for you." Julian blinked. The table went quiet. "Excuse me? I ordered the best red you have. That looks like the best." "It is the best, monsieur," Jean-Luc replied smoothly. "But this vintage is reserved specifically for the owner of the hotel. It is not on the public menu." Julian laughed, a nervous barking sound. "Well, I'm sure the owner won't mind. I'm Julian Thorne. I'm practically VIP here tonight. Just pour the damn wine." Jean-Luc turned his back on Julian. He walked around the table, stopping to the left of the head chair. He bowed slightly, a bow of genuine respect, not servitude, and presented the label to Lakota. "Madame," Jean-Luc said softly. The 1982 Margot, as requested. Shall I decant it now?" The table watched in stunned silence. Julian's mouth hung open. Bella looked confused, glancing between the waiter and Lakota. "Thank you, Jean-Luc," Lakota said, her voice calm and authoritative. "Please pour a glass for the senator as well. I think he would appreciate the notes of tobacco and truffle." "But not for my husband," she added, her eyes locking with Julian's. "Julian prefers something younger, less complex. Perhaps bring him the House Merlot, the 2023 blend." Julian's face turned a violent shade of red. "Lakota!" he hissed. "What are you doing? You're embarrassing me." "Am I?" Lakota asked innocently. "I thought you liked the younger vintages, Julian. Isn't that why Miss Sinclair is sitting at our table?" The insult landed with the force of a physical slap. Bella gasped, dropping her fork. The clatter echoed in the silence of the immediate vicinity. "That was uncalled for," Julian snapped, leaning in aggressively. "You're drunk." "I haven't had a drop, Julian," Lakota said, finally allowing the ice in her eyes to crack, revealing the fire beneath. "I am the only person at this table who is completely, utterly sober." She turned to Marcus, the general manager, who had materialized out of the shadows the moment Julian raised his voice. "Marcus," Lakota said, "Mr. Thorne seems unhappy with the wine service." "I can have security escort him to the bar if he needs to cool off," Marcus said instantly. His tone wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. Julian looked at Marcus, then at the security guard standing 10 feet away, hand hovering near his belt. He felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. He was used to being the loudest man in the room, the one who commanded attention. But tonight, the room felt hostile. The very walls seemed to be closing in on him. "No," Julian muttered, straightening his jacket. "It's fine. I'll drink the water." "Wise choice," Lakota said. She took a sip of the Chateau Margaux. It tasted like victory. The main course arrived, filet mignon with truffle butter. As the waiters placed the plates, Lakota noticed a subtle detail she had arranged earlier. Everyone's plate was garnished with an intricate carving of a vegetable flower. Everyone, that is, except Bella's. Bella's plate had a small, handwritten note tucked under the steak knife. Bella frowned, pulling the note out. She read it, her brow furrowing. "What does it say?" Julian asked, whispering. "It's a receipt," Bella whispered back, confused. "It says, dry cleaning, lipstick removal from collar of grey Armani suit. Date, October 14th. Cost, $45 gross." Julian froze. He owned a grey Armani suit, and on October 14th, he had told Lakota he was at a conference in Chicago. Lakota sliced her steak. "Is something wrong with your meal, Miss Sinclair?" "No," Bella stammered, shoving the note into her purse. She looked at Julian with wide, panicked eyes. "Nothing." "Good," Lakota said. "Eat up. You'll need your strength. The speeches are next." Julian lost his appetite. He looked at his wife, really looked at her, for the first time in years. He saw the sharpness of her jaw, the terrifying calmness of her hands. He felt a prickle of fear, a primal instinct warning him that he was the prey in the tall grass. But his arrogance was a powerful drug. "She knows about the affair," he thought. "That's all this is. She's jealous. She's acting out. I can fix this. I'll charm the room during the speech, remind everyone who the breadwinner is, and then I'll deal with her later." He didn't realize that later was a luxury he could no longer afford. The lights dimmed. The chatter in the ballroom subsided as a spotlight hit the small stage set up near the head table. Marcus walked to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, welcome to the Stratford Regency. We are gathered here to celebrate 10 years of marriage between Julian and Lakota Thorne. A decade of partnership. He paused on the word partnership with a dryness that suggested it was a legal term rather than a romantic one. "Please welcome," Marcus continued, "Mr. Julian Thorne." Applause rippled through the room. It was polite, dutiful. Julian stood up, buttoning his jacket. He squeezed Bella's shoulder, a reassurance for her, or perhaps himself, and walked to the stage. He took the microphone, flashing his signature grin. It was the grin that had sold shaky investment plans to half the people in the room. Thank you," Julian began, his voice booming. 10 years, a decade. They say marriage is a marathon, not a sprint. And let me tell you, I've been running hard." A few chuckles from his boys at table 5. "When I met Lakota," Julian continued, glancing back at the table where his wife sat like a stone statue. She was a shy girl. She didn't know much about the world. I like to think I've helped her grow. I've built a life for us. I've built a company from the ground up, the Thorne Architecture Group, which is about to change the face of New York. He paused for effect. But behind every great man there is a woman who keeps the home fires burning. Lakota, thank you for managing the house while I was out conquering the world." It was a condescending, dismissive speech. He was erasing her. He was painting himself as the titan and her as the domestic accessory. "And," Julian added, his eyes drifting to Bella, "I want to thank my incredible team, specifically my executive assistant, Bella Sinclair." "Stand up, Bella." The room went deadly silent. Bella hesitated, then stood up slowly. Her red dress was a beacon of impropriety. She gave a small, awkward wave. "Bella has been my right hand," Julian said, oblivious to the tension. "She's the future of the firm. Here's to the next 10 years, to growth, to Thorne Architecture." He raised his glass. About a third of the room raised theirs. The rest looked at their shoes. Julian walked back to the table, beaming. He sat down and whispered to Lakota, "See, that's how you handle a room." Lakota didn't look at him. She simply stood up. She didn't wait for an introduction. She didn't wait for the applause to die down. She walked to the microphone with a grace that was almost predatory. She adjusted the stand as it was set too high for her. Julian had never considered her height. "Thank you, Julian," Lakota said. Her voice was different now. It wasn't the soft, submissive voice of the housewife. It was lower, richer. It commanded the room instantly. Julian spoke about the last 10 years. Lakota began, looking out at the crowd. He spoke about building things, about legacy, and it got me thinking about the nature of construction. You see, to build something that lasts, you need a solid foundation. If the foundation is rotten, no matter how beautiful the facade is, the structure will collapse. She looked back at Julian. He was frowning, a glass of water halfway to his lips. Julian mentioned his firm, Lakota continued. He mentioned his hard work. But there are some things Julian forgot to mention. Details. And as we all know, the devil is in the details. She reached into the podium and pulled out a small remote control. "I prepared a little slide show," she said, "a retrospective of our decade together." She clicked the button. The massive projection screen behind her flickered to life. The first image wasn't a wedding photo. It was a bank statement. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a projected image of a joint account at Chase Bank. The balance was highlighted in red, $450,000. "This," Lakota said calmly, "is the current state of the Thorne Architecture Group." Julian choked on his water. He scrambled to his feet. "Lakota, what the hell is this? Turn it off." "Sit down, Julian," Lakota said. She didn't shout. She spoke into the microphone, her voice booming over his. "We are celebrating. And part of celebrating is being honest. I said, "Turn it off!" Julian lunged toward the stage. Two large men in black suits, security guards who had been waiting in the wings, stepped out and blocked his path. They didn't touch him, but their presence was a wall of muscle. "Please return to your seat, Mr. Thorne," one of them said. Julian looked around wildly. "This is insane! Marcus, get these goons off me. This is my party." Marcus stepped forward from the shadows, his face grim. "Actually, Mr. Thorne, per the contract signed by the venue owner, the microphone belongs to her." Julian froze. "What?" Lakota clicked the remote again. The screen changed. It was a screenshot of a credit card bill. "This is the Corporate American Express," Lakota narrated, like a professor giving a lecture. "May 12th, the Four Seasons Maui, a business trip for the Skyline Project." She clicked again. A photo appeared. It was high resolution. It showed Julian and Bella Sinclair sunbathing on a private balcony in Maui. Julian was applying sunscreen to Bella's back. The room erupted. The whispers turned into shouts. People were standing up to get a better look. Bella Sinclair shrieked. She covered her face with her hands, sinking low in her chair. "As you can see," Lakota said, her voice cutting through the noise, "the Skyline Project looks remarkably like a 23-year-old intern." "You boo!" Julian screamed, his facade completely shattering. He pointed a shaking finger at her. "You hacked my accounts. This is illegal. I'll sue you for everything you have." "Sue me?" Lakota laughed. It was a dark, amused sound. "With what money, Julian? You spent it all." She clicked the remote one more time. The screen changed to a legal document. A deed of trust. "You see?" Lakota said, stepping out from behind the podium, walking to the edge of the stage so she loomed over her husband. "You always told me not to worry my pretty little head about finances. You told me to just stay home and spend my inheritance. So, I did." She gestured to the ballroom, to the crystal chandeliers, to the waiters lining the walls, to the very floor Julian was standing on. "I spent my inheritance, Julian. I bought Vanguard Holdings." Julian stared at her, his brain trying to process the information. Vanguard. But Vanguard Holdings owned this hotel, Lakota explained slowly, as if talking to a child. "Which means, Julian, I own this hotel. I own the chairs you are sitting on. I own the champagne you just drank. I own the security guards standing behind you." She leaned forward, her eyes burning into his. "And most importantly, I own the debt your company owes to this venue, which is currently $150,000, and I am calling in the debt. Tonight." Julian's face went white. He looked at Bella, who was sobbing. He looked at the investors, who were looking at him with disgust. He looked at Lakota, and he realized, with a sickening lurch of his stomach, that the trap hadn't just sprung. It had decapitated him. "Now," Lakota said, turning to the security guards, "I believe Mr. Thorne and his executive assistant have a bill to settle before they are escorted off the premises." "Wait," Julian stammered, holding up his hands. "Lakota, baby, listen. It's not what it looks like. We can talk about this. We're married." "Are we?" Lakota signaled to the back of the room. The double doors swung open. A woman in a sharp grey suit walked in. She was carrying a briefcase. "Who is that?" Julian whispered, trembling. "That," Lakota said, "is my divorce attorney, Evelyn Price, and she has some paperwork for you to sign. Right now, in front of all these witnesses." The room held its breath. The drama was far from over. Julian Thorne was a cornered rat, and cornered rats tend to bite. Evelyn Price moved through the ballroom like a shark cutting through water. She was a woman who didn't just know the law, she weaponized it. She placed the leather briefcase on the table, right next to the untouched Chateau Margaux, the snap of the latches echoing like gunshots in the silent room. "Mr. Thorne," Evelyn said, her voice crisp, "I suggest you read these documents carefully. Although, knowing your history with contracts, reading isn't exactly your strong suit." Julian stared at the papers. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip the edge of the table to steady them. He looked up, his eyes darting to the crowd. He saw the faces of his peers, his investors, his friends. They weren't looking at him with pity. They were looking at him with the morbid curiosity of drivers slowing down to watch a car wreck. "I'm not signing anything," Julian spat, trying to summon a shred of his former bravado. He turned to Lakota. "You think you can ambush me? This is an anniversary party, Lakota. We are married. In the state of New York, that means equitable distribution. Half of what's mine is yours, and half of what's yours is mine." He pointed a finger at the floor. "That includes this hotel. If you bought it while we were married, it's a marital asset. I own half of this building." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Is he right? Does he own half? Lakota didn't flinch. She picked up the bottle of wine, pouring herself another glass with agonizing slowness. "Evelyn," Lakota said softly, "please educate my husband on the timeline of events." Evelyn pulled a single sheet of paper from the stack. "Mr. Thorne, do you recall the documents you signed 3 months ago? The ones you told Mrs. Thorne were for tax optimization regarding her family trust?" Julian frowned, sweat beading on his forehead. "Yeah. So what? That was just to move some money around to lower our bracket." "Not quite," Evelyn smiled, a predator baring teeth. "That document was a post-nuptial agreement. In it, you explicitly waived all rights to any assets acquired by Mrs. Thorne, using funds from the Van der Hoeven Family Trust. You also agreed that any debt incurred by Thorne Architecture Group would remain the sole liability of Julian Thorne." Julian's face went slack. No, I didn't read. I thought—" "You thought she was stupid," Evelyn finished for him. "You thought you were tricking her into signing over control of her trust. In reality, you signed away your claim to everything she was about to buy, including the Stratford Regency." The realization hit Julian like a physical blow. He staggered back, knocking into his chair. "And," Evelyn continued, twisting the knife, "there is an infidelity clause, a rather robust one. In the event of proven adultery, which I believe the slideshow has sufficiently demonstrated, you forfeit any claim to spousal support. You leave with what you came with." Lakota looked at him over the rim of her glass. "And considering you came here tonight in a tuxedo you rented, and a limousine you billed to a company that is currently bankrupt, I'd say you're leaving with nothing." Beside him, Bella Sinclair made a noise that sounded like a strangled cat. She stood up, her red dress suddenly looking cheap under the harsh ballroom lights. I have to go," Bella stammered. She grabbed her purse. "Julian, I can't be here for this. This is too much drama." She turned to flee, her heels clicking rapidly on the parquet floor. "Miss Sinclair!" Marcus's voice boomed across the room. Bella froze near the exit. 2 security guards stepped in front of the doors, arms crossed. "I'm afraid you cannot leave just yet," Marcus said, walking toward her with a silver tray in his hand. On the tray was a folded piece of heavy cardstock. "What is this?" Bella cried, her voice rising to a panic. "Am I being kidnapped? I'll call the police." "Please do," Marcus said calmly. "But first we must settle the bill. Mr. Thorne's credit card was declined 10 minutes ago. Since you are listed as the executive assistant and the secondary contact for the event booking, and since you have consumed— let's see. Marcus opened the bill. 3 bottles of Dom Perignon, the lobster bisque, the filet mignon, and a significant amount of the hotel's oxygen. The total comes to $12,400. Bella's jaw dropped. I don't have that kind of money. I'm an intern. An intern wearing Louboutins, Lakota noted from the head table, her voice carrying clearly. Perhaps Julian can help you? Oh, wait. That's right. Bella whipped around to face Julian. The adoration in her eyes had vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated venom. You said you were rich, she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at him. You said she was a boring housewife who didn't know how to spend money. You said you owned the city. Bella, baby, calm down, Julian pleaded, holding his hands up. It's a temporary cash flow problem. I can fix this. I just need to make a few calls. You're a fraud, Bella screamed. She reached into her purse and pulled out a diamond bracelet he had given her. She threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and clattered onto the floor. Take your fake jewelry back. Actually, Lakota interjected smoothly, that bracelet is real. He bought it with the down payment for the Riverside Orphanage project, which, coincidentally, never broke ground. The room gasped again. Senator Harrison, who had been watching the proceedings with a face like thunder, stood up. Julian, the senator barked. His voice was the kind that commanded Senate floors. Is that true? The Riverside funds? That was a municipal grant. Julian looked at the senator, terror in his eyes. Senator, listen. Funds are fungible. It's all part of the liquidity cycle. You stole money from orphans to buy your Mistress diamonds? Senator Harrison asked, his voice shaking with rage. I'm pulling the endorsement, and I'm calling the district attorney. No! Senator, wait! Julian lunged toward the senator, desperate to stop the one man who could shield him. Restrain him, Marcus ordered. The security guards moved in. Julian swung wildly, his fist connecting with the shoulder of a guard. It was a mistake. Within seconds, Julian Thorne, the man who thought he was a king, was pinned face down on the table, his cheek pressed into the remains of his lobster bisque. Lakota stood up slowly. She walked over to where her husband lay, pinned amongst the silverware. She looked down at him, her expression one of mild distaste, as if she were looking at a stain on the carpet. Get him up, she said. The guards hauled Julian to his feet. His bow tie was crooked, his suit was stained with soup, and his hair was a mess. He looked broken. Lakota, he wheezed. Please don't do this. I'm your husband. You were my husband, Lakota corrected. Now you're just a trespasser. She turned to Marcus. Marcus, throw them out. Both of them. Wait, a voice called out from the side of the room. Not just yet. It was Tobias, the waiter. He had removed his white serving jacket, revealing a badge clipped to his belt. He walked toward the head table, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his back pocket. The drama had just shifted from civil to criminal. The silence that fell over the ballroom was absolute. Even the breathing of the guests seemed to stop. Julian stared at the badge on Tobias's belt. It wasn't a private investigator's badge. It was federal. Tobias Reed, the man said, his voice calm and professional. FBI, White Collar, Crimes Division. Julian's knees buckled. The security guards had to hold him up. FBI, for a divorce. This is entrapment. This isn't about the divorce, Mr. Thorne, Tobias said, stepping closer. Although Mrs. Thorne's cooperation was instrumental in our investigation, this is about the Skyline project, and the Riverside Orphanage, and the $3 million in investor funds that you wired to offshore accounts in the Caymans. Tobias looked at Bella. And Miss Sinclair? You're listed as the signatory on 2 of those shell companies. Sinclair Consulting, I believe. Bella let out a high-pitched whimper. I just signed what he told me to sign. He said it was for tax purposes. I didn't know. Ignorance is a defense you can argue in court, Tobias said, unclipping the handcuffs. Julian Thorne, you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut around Julian's wrists was loud in the cavernous room. Click, click. The flashbulbs started going off. The guests had lost their inhibitions. Phones were out, recording every second. This was the social death of Julian Thorne, broadcast live to Instagram and TikTok. Julian looked around, his eyes wild and wet with tears. Lakota, help me! You can't let them take me. I'm the father of your... We could have had children. We didn't, Lakota said coldly. And thank God for that. I wouldn't want to explain to a child why their father is in federal prison. I'll rot in there, Julian screamed as Tobias began to lead him away. I'll lose everything. You already have, Lakota said. She signaled to Marcus. Marcus, the music, please. Marcus nodded to the band. The conductor, a confused but professional man, raised his baton. The band struck up a lively, upbeat jazz number. Hit the road, Jack. A few nervous titters of laughter rippled through the crowd, then more genuine laughter. The tension broke. As Julian was dragged toward the exit, dragging his feet like a petulant child, he passed Bella. You did this, Julian screamed at her. You and your expensive tastes. Me, Bella screamed back, as a female officer who had entered with Tobias took her arm. You used me. You said you were leaving her. I should have left you at the bar where I found you. They were bickering, screaming accusations at each other as they were hauled out of the double doors. The doors swung shut, cutting off their voices. The room was left with the upbeat jazz and the stunned guests. Lakota stood alone at the head table. She picked up the microphone one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, she said. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor of exhaustion in it. I apologize for the interruption to your dinner. The main course has been cleared, but dessert will be served shortly. It is a dark chocolate ganache with a bitter orange glaze. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. The people who had whispered about her, who had pitied her, who had underestimated her. I invite you all to stay, she said. Enjoy the hospitality of the Stratford Regency. Tonight the drinks are on the house. Consider it a celebration of new beginnings. She placed the microphone down. Senator Harrison was the first to clap. It was a slow, respectful clap. Then his wife joined in. Then the table next to them. Within seconds, the entire room was giving Lakota Thorne a standing ovation. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply nodded, acknowledged Marcus, and walked off the stage. She exited the ballroom through a side door, leaving the noise of the party behind. She walked down a quiet service corridor, her heels clicking on the linoleum. She found herself in the hotel kitchen. The staff froze as she entered. The chefs stopped chopping. The dishwashers stopped spraying. They knew who she was now. She wasn't just the lady in the green dress. She was the boss. Lakota walked over to a stainless steel counter where a young pastry chef was plating the desserts. She looked at the chocolate creation. It looks beautiful, Lakota said. Thank you, madame, the chef stammered. What is your name? Leo, madame. Leo, Lakota said, taking a deep breath. Make sure everyone gets a slice and send a bottle of the 1982 Margot to the staff break room. You all handled the service impeccably tonight under difficult circumstances. Yes, madame. Thank you, madame. Lakota turned and walked toward the freight elevator. She didn't want to go back to the penthouse yet. She didn't want to go back to the empty house in the suburbs. She pressed the button for the roof. The elevator rattled upward. When the doors opened, the cold night air hit her face. It was raining, a soft, cleansing drizzle. Lakota walked to the edge of the roof, looking out over the glittering skyline of Manhattan. She saw the construction cranes, the streams of traffic, the endless lights. She reached into her clutch and pulled out her wedding ring. It was a large diamond, flashy and ostentatious, exactly the kind of ring Julian had wanted her to wear so people would know he was successful. She looked at it for a long moment. She didn't feel sad. She didn't feel angry. She felt light. She didn't throw the ring off the roof. That would be dramatic, and she was done with drama. It would also be wasteful, and she was a businesswoman now. She put the ring back in her purse. I'll sell it, she thought, and I'll donate the money to the actual Riverside orphanage. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Evelyn. Message: he's in custody. Bail denied. Bella is cooperating for a plea deal. It's over, Elle. You're free. Lakota typed back. Thank you. She put the phone away and looked at the city. She owned a hotel. She had rid herself of a parasitic husband. She had her dignity. But there was one loose end. One final twist that even Julian hadn't seen coming. She turned away from the ledge and walked back to the elevator. Waiting for her there was a man. He wasn't a waiter. He wasn't a lawyer. It was Marcus. But he wasn't wearing his manager's uniform. He was wearing a trench coat, holding an umbrella. Did he suspect anything? Marcus asked quietly. About the ownership? No, Lakota said. And about us? Marcus asked. Lakota smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had worn all night. It reached her eyes, softening the hard lines of her face. Julian was so busy looking at himself, Marcus, she said, stepping under the umbrella he held out for her. He never noticed that his wife and his general manager have been meeting for coffee every Tuesday for the last 2 years. Coffee, Marcus chuckled, and strategy. Mostly strategy, Lakota admitted. But I think, starting tomorrow, we can stop talking about Julian Thorne. Agreed, Marcus said. He pressed the button for the lobby. Where to, boss? Home, Lakota said. I have a company to run in the morning. As the elevator doors closed, shutting out the rain and the city, Lakota Thorne finally relaxed. The anniversary was over. The marriage was dead. Long live the Queen. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. Julian Thorne walked into that ballroom thinking he was the king of the castle, completely unaware that he was standing on a trapdoor that his wife had spent months building. It wasn't just a divorce, it was a corporate dismantling. Lakota didn't just take his money, she took his pride, his reputation, and his freedom, all without ever raising her voice above a conversational volume. What makes this story so satisfying isn't just the money or the hotel ownership. It's the patience. Think about the discipline it took for Lakota to sit there for months, watching him lie, watching him drag his mistress around town, all while she secretly held the deed to his entire existence. She gave him enough rope to hang himself, and he did it with a smile on his face. It's a brutal reminder that the most dangerous person in the room is never the loudest one. It's the one who knows everything and says nothing until the check comes due. And that final twist with Marcus? It proves that Lakota wasn't just reacting to a bad husband. She was curating a better life, piece by piece, right under his nose. Now, I need to know your thoughts, because my jaw is still on the floor. If you felt a rush of satisfaction when Lakota revealed the bank account balance on the big screen, do me a huge favor and smash that like button right now. It helps the algorithm find more people who appreciate a good justice story. And here is the question of the day for the comment section. If you were in Lakota's shoes, would you have done what she did and had him arrested publicly, or would you have just taken the money and vanished quietly? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you crave more stories about betrayal, karma, and high-stakes drama, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We have a new story dropping next week involving a cheating billionaire and a prenup that didn't say what he thought it said. You do not want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, be careful who you betray, because you never know who really owns the building.